this thing on?
If you like rock music, punk, metal, or blues, then you've come to the right place, because we like it too. It's Soundcheck. It's Soundcheck. It's Soundcheck. Check, check, check.
I love it. Great.
And welcome back to Soundcheck, the first, best, and only music podcast. I am your host, Ben Ackley, and I'm here with
Michael Livingston
And Brody Breton.
And today we are talking about outsider music, and we don't housekeep anymore, so let's get into it.
Yes.
I think that the best way to talk about outsider music, Michael came up with this, is to start it with this song. Because the way that outsider music works is that you know it when you hear it.
Yes.
So we are going to play a song from probably the king of outsider music.
And one of the probably the best known outsider music albums.
Definitely. This is from Hi, How Are You by Daniel Johnston, Walking the Cow.
Try to remember, but my feelings can't know for sure. Try to reach out, but it's gone. Lucky stars in your eyes. I am walking the cow.
So, I mean, that was just a little bit of Walking the Cow, and I think we'll probably talk ad nauseum about Daniel Johnston.
Yes.
And a bunch of people. But before we start, I want to note that I'm going to be quoting at length from Erwin Chussid's Songs in the Key of Z, which is probably the outsider music Bible, I would say. He was an expert that did a radio show for like 20 years about outsider music. And just a truly great read if you can find it. But we're going to be pulling lots of info from that. So even if I'm not citing stuff when I say it, if I directly quote, I'll mention it. But
May I ask a question real quick?
yeah,
Did he coin the genre term?
I don't know, actually. I think Erwin preferred the term incorrect music because I think it gets rid of that otherness a little bit
Yeah.
in a way.
I can see that.
But enough of my yakking.
There's also another great resource y'all should look up by Alpha Media. It's a YouTube video, just 12 minutes long, gives a great general history and like a dozen really good songs to jump off of, a lot of which we're going to be showing today.
Yeah, that's a really good overview. And I think we're going to kind of get into that and go a little bit deeper on a few of these artists and just sort of give a bit of an overview of the big stuff. And then I'm just going to talk about some stuff I really like. Because I've been into this for a few years now.
After coming off of a two-parter Country, this is going to kind of be a nice little quick one, 10 songs to get you into style sort of thing.
This is sort of your detox.
Yeah. I think Ben's will also be kind of taking the reins. He's kind of the outsider music aficionado here, so.
Yeah, and that being said, I can talk a little bit about this term that we've used 10 times already that we haven't even really defined yet, outsider music. So I think to talk about what it is, first we should talk about how it happens. Mm-hmm. So this is from Songs in the Key of Z. Outsider music sometimes develops naturally. In other cases, it could be the product of damaged DNA, psychotic seizures, or alien abduction. Perhaps medical malpractice, incarceration, or simply drug fry triggers its evolution. Maybe shrapnel in the head, possession by the devil, or submission to Jesus. Chalk it up to communal upbringing or bad beer. There's no universal formula. That's one characteristic that makes outsider music so refreshing. Its unpredictability. It's undeniable that on first listening, there's often a measure of comedic value to some of these artists. But inevitably, there's a je ne sais quoi that transcends laughter. Each of these artists, regardless of accessibility, has a singular identity and a recognizable style. So essentially, outsider music has that I'll know it when I hear it quality.
Yeah.
But if we want, should we try to define it?
Yeah, sure.
I would break it down to three main components. Like we're saying, the know it when you hear it, the originality, and then I would add I would add lo-fi to that as well. But even then, some of these artists we're going to talk about are masters of production.
I think lo-fi is something to look out for, definitely. But as recording technology improves and becomes more widely available, it's becoming less and less.
I would say a lot of early outsider music, particularly from especially late 70s to the early 90s, I would say, it does have a lot of crossover with lo-fi.
Definitely. And on that note, low production value is something you should look for too. So if you're hearing, especially from times before now, if you're hearing programmed drums or programmed keyboard parts, stuff like that, stuff that you wouldn't think that a real musician would use to make a song.
I think another thing that comes with it, I know is a kind of a through line with it, is this kind of childlike naivete to the music, whether they don't know that they're making something a little left field, or it's even in the case of such as Daniel Johnston, childlike lyrics and innocence to it. It seems to be a very common through line with it.
Yeah, I think that is really, for me, what sets outsider music apart from just experimental music or avant-garde music, is the person has to think that what they're doing is commercial, or it have some sort of commercial appeal, or is more than it is. How it sounds in their head is different than how it sounds to you and I.
And I think that's, as we've discussed, some musicians we know of, whether or not they're outsider, is the big one that, as you just mentioned, is, are they intentionally trying to sound out there? Are they intentionally trying to sound experimental? Because as you said, to them it sounds like mainstream music in their head.
Right. If you think you're outsider, you're not outsider.
Exactly.
I think is the moral of the story.
Yeah. And we'll also go into kind of what our author here keeps saying is it can come from so many different places. In some cases, they involve the wildest stories and tales ever. So I think a lot of that is going to be the most entertaining part of this episode, is going into the backstory of these artists.
Yeah, there are lots of really good anecdotes here. And I think the important thing to think of moving forward is it's okay to laugh at some of this stuff, but there's something else that you're going to hear in it that you'll appreciate long after the comedic value wears off.
I think that what makes Daniel Johnston the king of outsider is I think even if you have no idea of outsider at all, you can tell by the lyrics and even just the music quality, again, whether intentional or not, there's just some sadness and melancholy about it. His music, at least, is no laughing matter.
Right. And we'll talk a little more about Daniel Johnston later, I think.
Yes. I will add one more cherry on top to the definition of outsider music.
Yeah.
It's recognition from a lot of mainstream artists. For example, Daniel Johnston was a top-tier artist for Kurt Cobain. As well as, help me out here, Zappa.
Yeah.
Zappa. He was a big fan of Daniel Johnston. The B-52s were a big fan of my recommendation later on. So a lot of these bigger mainstream artists find inspiration and originality from these hyper-original bands and artists.
I think we can talk about another favorite band of Frank Zappa and Kurt Cobain, that being the Shaggs. This is their song, My Pal Foot Foot.
My pal's name is Foot. I never find him home. I go to his house, knock at his door. People come out and say, Foot, don't live here no more. My pal Foot, always likes to roam. My pal Foot, Now he has no home. Where will Foot go? What will Foot do? Oh, Foot, I wish I could find you. I've looked here, I've looked there, I've looked everywhere. Oh, Foot, why can't I find you? Foot, where can you be? Foot, why won't you answer me? Foot, oh, Foot.
So it's a bit of my pal Foot from the Shaggs' Philosophy of the World, their first album and widely considered one of the worst albums of all time by those not in the know.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's break it down to its main components, being the really intriguing backstory of how this all came together.
Right, so the Shaggs were the Wiggins sisters, and their dad, for one reason or another, really wanted them to be rock stars.
Well, the psychic.
Oh, well, there is I don't know if it's an apocryphal story or a true story, but either a psychic that may have been his mother-in-law or may have been unrelated said, your daughters will be rock stars. Well, obviously the thing for Arthur Wiggin to do is enroll all of his daughters in music lessons and have them start a band called the Shaggs, named after apparently shaggy dogs and the popular shag haircut at the time, popularized by the Beatles. They got to practicing. They practiced for a while. They started booking gigs. They would actually play regularly at their town hall in Fenton, I believe, was where they lived. So they had a weekly, I think every Saturday night, they would have a dance, and the Shaggs would play there. And the music sounded a lot like that.
Yeah, and we have to acknowledge the brevity and the speed that this father wanted his daughters to become famous. I mean, you can tell that they weren't in music lessons, if music lessons at all, for very long before they started playing gigs and recording an album in Boston. But yeah, like you're saying, they would play gigs in New Hampshire's. Then I think less than a year later, they were in the studio. Just total sort of inorganic way of putting together an album.
Right.
Know?
He got him going really quick, and they wrote an album full of songs and then got into the studio. Apparently, they closed the control room doors while they were recording because all the engineers were rolling on the floor laughing, literally.
Yeah, I know when they played gigs, kids from all around would come to make fun of them.
Yeah, I think their first gig they had soda cans thrown at them, but apparently their gigs always didn't have a negative component. So a veteran major label exec by the name of Palmer, he has a quote in Songs from the Key of Z, and I'm going to read it here verbatim. They sounded exactly like the record. It was unbelievable. The locals came out and danced in a clumsy, arrhythmic, Night of the Living Dead sort of way. I remember thinking, how can you dance to this music? But they did. So, I mean, at least in their hometown, the Shaggs became a bit of a weekly sensation. And their music sounded like that live, and it sounds like that on the record. And the Shaggs managed to make one of the most unique sounding recordings in music history, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think it's also to be said, those record execs, I think 1,000 of Philosophy of the World was meant to be printed. Only about 100 of the original copies survived.
Yeah, there is a story about that I think there were 1,000 pressed, and then there was some shady guy who maybe ran away with 900 copies. I don't know why he would, because there's not much of a commercial appeal, especially in 1969. But it was either that or he was just like giving them away out of the studio. But eventually these albums end up in people's hands. In 1980, it's reissued on NRBQ's Rounder Records. And it becomes a pretty big deal after that. I think that's around the time that Zappa hears about it. Eventually it gets to Kurt Cobain, and the rest is history.
Zappa had a very famous quote about the Shaggs.
Yes. he had a very stupid quote about the Shaggs. Better than the Beatles?
Yeah, he said the Shaggs are better than the Beatles. But yes, very famously one of Zappa's favorite bands, and I believe it is on Kurt Cobain's top 50 albums of all time.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. The main component here that we need to look at is this unadulterated originality. You've never heard anything sounding like the Shaggs, and you never will. That's just a fact.
Yeah, and I've seen lots of it. You can overanalyze the music of the Shaggs to death and say, oh, the Wiggin sisters are playing in polyrhythms and the drums are here and this is here. The fact of the matter is there are 3 people playing instruments and 1 person singing, and they're all in completely different time signatures. It's like a musical impossibility, where if you put everyone in the studio and you have them start playing, if you have any sort of musical mindset, you will sync up in some way. Yeah. So this total A rhythm that they've achieved on basically every song on this album is totally unbelievable, and it's still replicated today when Dot plays live, which she does with some regularity, and the songs sound like they do on the record.
And I think either it was the Alpha Media video or a different video I watched on either the Shaggs or Outsider Music. But in some fashion, the psychic was right. They became rock stars.
They did eventually become rock stars. And there's a lot to laugh at with Philosophy of the World. Like, it's a funny album, definitely, upon first blush. But I own it on vinyl. It's behind me right now in the video. I've listened to it all the way through on multiple occasions. It's a real so being someone who listens to music all the time like me, I get into these sort of funks where it's like I just can't appreciate stuff as much as I would, if I've listened to 100 songs over the last however long, like if I've just been listening to a shitload of music, then I kind of stop appreciating it. So an album like Philosophy of the World is something that really breaks me out of that cycle.
Real palate cleanser.
Right. I think this is something that the Alpha Media pointed out was like when we do our CD dollar bin episodes or something like that, chances are everything we pull from that dollar bin is going to sound like something we've heard before. Mm-hmm. That's not the case with this kind of music.
No, definitely not. And that's the really important thing is it follows the same sort of diagram for me that movies do, where there's this giant swath of stuff in the middle of music that's just like average, but the stuff way over here in terms of talent or quality or whatever is really fun to listen to, and the stuff way over here is really fun to listen to.
I think what's really interesting about the Shaggs, as you can tell, they know very little about their instruments. The guitars are out of tune, they're out of sync. I would say the only thing that is really decent is the vocals are like fine. Mm-hmm. They're not like, I don't think they're like bad. But I think this goes with a lot of outsider music, is that even intentionally, I don't think this could have been replicated.
No, and that is really the significant thing. That's why so many music people especially get off on the music of the Shaggs, is that it's something, if us 3 came in here today and said, okay, let's for our cover at the end of the episode do a Shaggs cover, that would be the hardest shit we would ever have to play.
Yeah. Harder than trying to replicate Creedence Clearwater last week.
Right. I mean, if we wanted to accurately depict one of their songs and not try to turn it into a more conventional song or whatever, it would take us days and days and days of practice to even get close.
Well, I mean, I think also with that, they're probably, I don't know this for a fact, but they're probably, they're out of tune, so we would have to be like exactly as out of tune as they are. And then also I'm going to assume that they're probably not playing real chords or playing notes with any sort of intention.
I seriously have no clue.
So like, I think that's the thing. I don't think, but here's the thing though, and I think they mentioned this in the Alpha Media video. When Dot plays, they've somehow transcribed it.
They play it live exactly like it is on the record.
So there's got to be some talent behind that. So go the Shaggs.
Yes. And Michael?
No, I don't really have much more to add other than that, is that we're going to go through and explain these artists a little more beat by beat, but with the Shaggs, there's so much originality and so much to unpack that
there's only so much we can say.
Yeah.
It's not like we can say, oh, this kind of sounds like this mixed with this. The Shaggs sound like the Shaggs. It's it.
And also, I think, they've been talked about to death. We can't really add any more to the
So it's like the Shaggs and Daniel Johnston, and if there was a Mount Rushmore of outsider music, I think it's pretty safe to say they'd both be up there.
Ben, I think you're really excited to talk about the next one we have in our playlist.
I really am. So The Shaggs were my first full album of outsider music that I was really introduced to. But the first band that I ever heard that I qualify as outsider music, I think most would, is a Virginia family band known as 3 Beat Slide. We're going to play for you, I guess, what I would call their biggest hit. This is The Beach Boogie.
Here it comes. Are you ready?
Let's go.
Doesn't matter where you are, you can even do it in your car. East Coast, West Coast, mid-states too, they know how to really shake it too. So you say you want some more, well do it in the grocery store. How about at the gas station? Now watch it spread across the nation. Do the beach boogie, yeah, yeah. Do the beach boogie, yeah, yeah. Do the beach boogie, yeah, yeah. Gotta keep grooving, oh yeah. Do the beach boogie, yeah, yeah. Do the beach boogie, yeah, yeah. Do the beach boogie, yeah, yeah. Gotta keep grooving. Doesn't matter where you are.
Would you like to showcase what you
Oh
have
yeah.
here?
So for audio listeners and for the video listeners, I have a few pieces of 3 Beat Slide ephemera around here. Right here behind my Daniel Johnston-esque chord organ, I have a signed photo from 3 Beat Slide. Right here, I have a signed CD copy of their Visualize EP. This is so they were signed and numbered. This is number 52. And this EP came out in 2016.
Keep it together, man.
And I didn't bring it, but at home I have a copy of their 3 Beat Slide board game, which cost me $40.
And was it worth it?
No. But I think, and I'm really just piecing this together now, I think I can unabashedly say that 3 Beat Slide is one of my favorite bands of all time.
Please explain to the audience.
So I first heard tell of 3 Beat Slide sometime in probably 2016 or 2017. I don't know if it was... This is the song that's music video was making the rounds. I know H3H3 did a video on this music video.
Right.
But I know I had friends who were into this at the same time too. So somehow the Beach Boogie was making the rounds on the internet. And I heard about it and I watched that video and I laughed my ass off. And most people, especially in the internet age with something like this, would move on. You know, you see it, it's funny. There's an awkward family band that's dancing around and making this. And then you move on. But I was like, there has to be something more here. My brain really started to go because I had never heard anything so far outside the mainstream. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, so do these people know what they're doing? Do they know it's funny? Do they know it's bad? What do they know? So I dive deeper into them. I listen to all their stuff on YouTube, which at this point was probably only 5 or 6 songs. And I really just start figuring out as much as I can about this band, about their like style and their influences, and just it becomes sort of a puzzle that I try to unlock, because there's every time I find something new, like a radio interview where all the DJs are making fun of the dad, but he's just sort of earnestly talking about his music, I'll find them performing on Tosh.0. And it's like, I keep finding these things, and it's like there's evidence for they know what they're doing, but then there's evidence for they're being totally earnest. And I just fall down the rabbit hole with them. And they release maybe a song per year, maybe 2, sometimes 0. But I have been eagerly awaiting every song that comes out. They seem to still be doing stuff. I think I can talk about the band members a little bit too.
Sure.
So 3 Beat Slide is also known as the Sturm family. The band does not include the mother of the Sturm family, but it does include Edward Jr., Edward Sr., and Diana. So Diana and Edward Jr. are brother and sister, and then Edward Sr. is, of course, the dad and I would say band leader. He takes a lot of the lead vocals. He seems to do a lot of the songwriting. And And on their website, he says, what's there not to like about being in a family band while having fun making music? That pretty much sums up my motivation for doing what I do. Being able to create something positive and spending time together is pretty special. So, from what I have surmised, 3-Beat Slide is trying to make fun, pop-influenced music, sometimes leaning into rock a little bit more. And they really like making music videos too. They've never released an album. They only release singles. They're sort of like they're doing that internet age thing where it's like here's a song. Like you don't have to try to cobble together an album or something like that.
So can you contextualize for us why do you put this in the Outsider Music label?
Okay, I think it's definitely so Beach Boogie that you just heard. There's not really a genre. Like I don't really know if I could slot that song into comfortably, oh, this is a rap song or this is a pop song, because it's too slow to be a rap song, but there's not really, like, it's sort of like a chant more than anything, and there's just sort of sounds happening in different drum parts, but there's not really chords conceivably or many notes. They have another song that I would call, I guess, a little bit more of a rap song. That is Skip, Skip, Slide. That one has a pretty killer fake saxophone part. But it's those two songs specifically that are really far out. Like, I've never heard anything else like those. And those really piqued my curiosity. Beyond that, there are elements of Outsider Music and a lot of the other stuff that they've done, but it's those two songs, those two earlier songs from them that really do it.
I have a quick question about them, because you seem to know a lot about them. Have they kind of taken like a Tommy Wiseau arc, and do they kind of like accept or lean into that they're kind of a joke?
I have seen, the only evidence I've seen of that is their appearance on Tosh.0. Other than that, it seems like they know that, like, oh, we're just like they don't think that they're like some sort of prog band or something, but they know, so they're like, oh, we're just pop music, you know, like we're not super serious, but I think that they take what they do very seriously.
The only influence I can see with Beach Boogie, which it's definitely in the pop realm, it's almost, and I think this is very obvious, it's almost trying to be like I can't think of the actual song name, so I'm just gonna do my best to sing them. Like the song that goes like to the right, like that song. Cupid Shuffle, or the big one with the everybody clap your hands line. I don't know what that's called.
We know the one.
But like those dancing songs that become hits for 2 seconds.
Mambo Number 5.
That is. Whoa. Do not insult Mr. Lou Bega.
I'm not slandering Mambo Number 5. I don't know. I'm saying I think 3-Beat Slide has that same sense of fun that like that late 90s pop music does.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. There was one.
The Venga Boys.
Yeah, so like that's like the only influence I can see, but even that kind of makes it outsider because it's such a specific influence.
Right, it's a very specific influence, and then they're doing their best to create something like that, and it just sort of falls on its face.
Yes, but I'm glad that we have a band here that's very near and dear to you.
I honestly cannot believe that we're like analyzing 3-Beat Slide on this show right. But I have really spent hours and hours of my time with friends, family, priests, pastors, police officers, when I showed up at the Sturm's house, talking about this band and what they mean to me. And it's obviously there's something funny about some of their music, at least, and it's fun to laugh at others' misfortune at sometimes. I cannot.
I would say, unfortunately, for Outsider Music, this one unfortunately stays in its comedic realm. Would you say?
I would say, yeah. There's not like that. There's not that depth of beauty that Daniel Johnston has.
Right.
But there is this.
I guess
there's something to it for me. I can't totally explain it.
I'm looking at this picture. Could you hold up the picture for the camera?
Oh yeah. So here.
Like, look at the family. They look like they're having fun. There's something nice about that.
There's a wholesome quality to it.
It's wholesome. That's it. Yeah.
That I think is one of the main attractions to me, because there's even though it's bad, there's like this let's make a hit song sort of attitude where it's like I really appreciate that. And you can totally tell too in the music videos, like they have a song called America is the Place to Be that they filmed when they were on vacation in Washington, D.C., or like they have a song that they filmed when they were on vacation somewhere in the Caribbean. It's like they're clearly good folks who are doing well for themselves, and they just are having fun.
Can we move on to another outsider music king, though, that kind of carries this comedic role with him?
I was gonna say, you mentioned the Mount Rushmore with the Shaggs and Daniel Johnston. I'd say he'd be on there as well.
Yes, this guy definitely would be. We're not going to play his big one, but here's a bit of a message for you from Wesley Willis. This is from his Greatest Hits Volume 2, compiled by Jello Biafra.
Let me find another job. It doesn't pay me enough money at all. I want a better one. I'm going to tell you this. Fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. Take this job and shove it. I'm not working for you anymore. Stick it up your ass. Suck my damn dick, asshole. Fuck your crummy ass jerk. Fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you.
So there's a bit of a taste of Fuck You by Wesley Willis. The king of pre-programmed keyboard beats, I would say.
Yes. That is his big thing, is that he usually just uses the presets on his keyboard.
Yeah, and now that you've heard that, you've kind of you have a pretty good idea of what the vast majority of Wesley Willis songs sound like.
And I think it's very likely, you mentioned his biggest hit, it's very likely you've probably heard his biggest hit, which is Rock and Roll McDonald's.
Of course, named after and about the famous Rock and Roll McDonald's in Chicago, which is no more. Rest in peace to the Rock and Roll McDonald's. Thank you for your service. So Wesley Willis was a literal giant of a man, a huge, super tall, giant guy who I think had schizophrenia.
Yes.
And made music such as that. Wesley claimed to have written 35,000 songs, and after listening to a lot of his oeuvre, I would believe it.
It's not on streaming, but I'm pretty sure if you go on his Wikipedia or AllMusic or something, you can see he released a hefty bunch of albums.
Yeah, and I'm sure that there's lots of stuff that didn't get recorded in his lifetime.
Yes, and I think this one definitely, upon your first few listens, definitely stays in the comedic realm.
Yeah.
Just because of the bluntness of his lyrics. And, I don't think there's any shame in that,
Well, and it is funny, I think.
Yes,
like, and I don't think I don't know if he's not trying for the comedic element.
And I think with Wesley Willis, if you listen to enough, you'll begin laughing at him, which I will say is an appropriate response upon first listen. There's no shame in that. But I think as you listen to it more, you'll start laughing with him.
And I think with his stuff, you get a sense of the guy.
Yes.
As you go. You get a sense of his likes, his dislikes, his personality. Like, as you listen to Wesley Willis's music, you sort of figure out who he is. Mm-hmm. And he's just this big, jovial character.
Right. And he was a great visual artist.
Yeah. I don't know if there's video of it, but there is an ABC News profile on him somewhere. Mm-hmm. But he was able to sell CDs pretty easily when he went on tour. He was able to sell out shows pretty easily, too. There's just something about the guy that people really like.
I'll put this in post, but I'll put a picture of him. He has a permanent bruise on his forehead because it was traditional of him to headbutt his fans in a loving way, not in a violent way.
A soft, loving headbutt. Yeah.
Yes.
And I mean, Wesley Willis he seems like a really lovable guy, and you get that through his music very quickly,
Yes.
in the way that you get it about someone like Jonathan Richman.
And like the vocal delivery and the lyrics are somewhere in between hip hop and punk, and just the way delivery and just the very anti-authoritarian and confrontational nature of them.
Yeah, there is kind of a punk sensibility to it with his lyrics and just sort of the way he tells it like it is, and just very bluntly talks about how he feels.
Yeah, and yeah, Wesley Willis is great. Check out the 2 comps on Spotify.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of analysis you can do of his music. Just listen to it and you'll like it.
Much like Daniel Johnston, very tragic backstory, but I'd say he's worth your time. Again, Wesley Willis would be on the Outsider Music Mount Rushmore, for
Definitely.
sure.
I think the the greaseball we're going to talk about next would probably also be on the Outsider Music Mount Rushmore.
I'd agree with that. Everyone should be able to recognize this upcoming song.
Tiptoe through the window, by the window, that is where I'll be. Come tiptoe through the tulips with me. Oh, tiptoe from the garden of the willow tree, and tiptoe through the tulips with me.
The 60s must have been really crazy to live through. Because if a man like that could have been popular then, anything is possible.
Yeah. You might recognize that song from SpongeBob.
Also,
One of
Insidious.
Yeah.
Insidious as well. That is, of course, Tiny Tim, a 6'1" man who chose as his instrument of choice the ukulele. In a time when the ukulele was not popular at all, and had not been popular since like Eisenhower.
Right.
But he did it. So Tiny Tim was an extremely eccentric guy. He would powder his face. He had long, stringy hair. He wore mismatched suits, and he was a bit of a ladies' man. In a less than stellar way.
Less than a legal way.
In a less than legal way, yeah. Tiny Tim was a creep. And apparently there is a documentary. I know it's been making rounds on the film festival circuit for like the last 2 years, but I think there's a documentary you can finally watch online on Tiny Tim, which I will be spending time with. Maybe I'll talk about it after I see it. But I do have a bit of an anecdote about Tiny Tim and his career's beginnings. That can kind of give you a sense of the guy and how he had to struggle to get to his brief 15 minutes of fame. 5 minutes, 3 minutes of fame. So this is Harry Stein talking about Tiny Tim's pre-fame places that he would have to play. Hubert's Museum and Live Flea Circus epitomized the underside of show business, the dream gone sour. Located in the basement of a penny arcade in Times Square, Hubert's was as low as a performer could sink. Customers showed up more to gawk than to be entertained, and they were rarely disappointed. The great pitcher Grover Cleveland Alexander, grown old and fat, was once reduced to putting himself on display. So was Jack Johnson, the former heavyweight champ. On the same bill as magicians, jugglers, and strongmen, there was invariably an assortment of human curiosities. CeeLo had seal flippers instead of arms. Jose de Leon, another regular, had no appendages whatsoever. Albert Alberta was billed as a living, breathing hermaphrodite. In the back, Professor Roy Heckler took his trained fleas through their turns. Tiny Tim played Hubert's in 1959, when he was known as Larry Love. His stay in the basement was remarkable neither for its duration nor for the attention he received. The fact is, he fit right in. So no matter the point of time he was alive in, Tiny Tim was always a man out of time. He was an oddball. He was someone who was obsessed with the music from about 1900 to 1945. So sort of pre-World War II stuff. He had memorized about a zillion songs, and he could play them front to back to front, however you wanted them. Tiny Tim was, for being such a strange guy, truly a kind of folk troubadour. Like, Tiny Tim did the rounds in the same circuit that Bob Dylan, Joan Baez, Joni Mitchell were in. Mm-hmm. Like, he was playing the same places, playing on the same nights. He stayed at Bob Dylan's house. So Tiny Tim, as much as seeming like and being a big weirdo, was also kind of he was as far outside of the in crowd as you can be while still being in it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And he just really there's something about his music too.
Yeah. I think his music speaks for itself.
Yeah, there's kind of this. I think if I really had to talk about what does it for me with his stuff, there's this 40s, like 1900s, early 1900s song style, and all these great old covers he pulled out that no one had heard in the last 20, 30 years, like Tiptoe Through the Tulips. But then it's also done with a late 60s production style. Mm-hmm. So they're like trying to accentuate, especially on that first album, kind of the psychedelic nature of it, or like the weirdness is really put front and center. Mm. And I think there's something really special about that. And to really hammer home how popular Tiny Tim was in his brief year of fame, in 1969, he married on The Tonight Show, Victoria May Budinger, who was 17 at the time. Miss Vicky is what he called her. He called every woman Miss, and he called every man Mister. That's just the way Tiny was. But he got married to Miss Vicky on The Tonight Show, and 40 million people watched. It was one of the highest rated TV shows and biggest journalistic events of 1969. The year that we went to the moon.
The summer of love. Like,
yeah. One of the biggest watershed years in American history. That was one of the biggest things on TV.
Manson murders.
Yeah. Tiny Tim getting married on The Tonight Show for some reason.
He really, in a not good way, but he really made his 15 minutes of fame count.
Yeah, he did. And so Tiny Tim, a man who got very famous at the time. I think we're done with Tiny Tim, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Tiny Tim, a man who got very famous for a second. The next person we're going to be talking about is someone who purposefully languished in obscurity for the vast majority of his career.
And I think if we are to assume that this Mount Rushmore has 6 people on it, because the Shaggs count as 3, but he would also kind of be on there, I think.
He would be, but it would maybe just be a circle and a big question mark. Yeah. So who we're going to talk about next is Jandek. I can't tell you that much about him because, to be honest, we don't know that much. But we're going to let the music speak here. This is a little bit of They Told Me I Was a Fool.
You got real fancy instincts, but your mouth is so large. I think I see 100 people in it. I guess you like it that way 'cause you're a flop.
You kind of have an idea of what a lot of Jandek stuff sounds like now. The first part of his career, he released lots of albums that were just sort of that. Him with sort of a song and with some lyrics singing over just kind of detuned guitar playing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he knew how to play the guitar or not.
Or knows, because he's still alive.
Knows. He is still alive. You can see him live once in a while. I think we do have a name now. He might have... So, backstory. Jandek started in the 70s, just releasing albums from his company, Corwood Industries. And lots of times the album covers would be just sort of a picture of something, we presume, in his house. A couch, a window.
Sometimes a picture of him.
Sometimes a picture of his face, or what we presumed to be his face for a very long time, because we didn't know. But there's a long first period where that's what the vast majority of his music sounds like, and he was just sort of releasing it. No credits on the album of who plays what, no real information other than song titles and lengths. That was kind of it. So just like the Barest Bones private press stuff, but without even any real credit, just Jandek. That's it. And Jandek would send his stuff around unsolicited to people, to radio stations, to music journalists, and eventually a few people got on his trail, started trying to contact him for interviews, started trying to figure out who the man was. But it wasn't really until the early 2000s when he played his first live shows and started granting an interview every once in a while that we kind of figured out who the man was. But it hasn't really made a difference. There's this air of mystery over all of his stuff.
Yeah, I think like the most we know about him is like who he is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we know a little bit, but we definitely don't have backstories on albums or song lyrics or anything like that.
That's some of the reasons why Jandek stuff is some of my favorites on the playlist. I really enjoyed looking into this stuff because it gave me the same sort of like despair and loneliness that I would get from like no wave stuff, like early, like that super early Sonic Youth.
Yeah.
I know you weren't a big fan of, but like that sort of like detached, detuned attitude. It was just like, I don't know. It hits a different place.
No, I definitely think like that was actually when Brody and I were assembling this playlist and I played this. That's kind of that's my only frame of reference, was hearing that Sonic Youth stuff. But Jandek was doing it earlier, and I think he could totally know what he was doing, but he really qualifies for this because we just don't know what place he was at when he started recording this stuff.
To me, that's just very strange. I mean, for like he probably like he probably was working jobs, and like people had no idea that like he had like this cult following or
right. And it's kind of this interesting. It almost predicted the way things would work on the internet.
Right, yeah, because I know a lot of artists very early in their career nowadays, such as The Weeknd, kind of started off with like, who is this person releasing music? So
right.
Yeah.
There was like this anonymity and this just this kind of prolific nature to his recording output as well, that hasn't really been matched by an independent musician until more modern times.
And he's still releasing music to this day. I believe he's released 2 albums this year.
He is still releasing music. You can shoot him an email if you want to. He will respond. He responded to me when I said he should put his stuff on streaming. He said they are not currently considering it, but they might in the future.
Oh.
But I don't know. Maybe shoot Jandek an email and see if he'll put a few of the albums on streaming.
You can buy CDs of it on Corwood Industries website.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you can get all of his stuff online. So just check it out. As his music goes on, eventually he's introducing other band members. There's a song called, I think, Time and Space that's like 7 minutes long, but it sort of plays around with like a kind of bluesy thing. I really enjoy that. That's probably my favorite of his. But I mean, there's this really sinister nature to his stuff, but then there's also the anonymity, and putting that all together, it kind of becomes a fun mystery, and it's pretty menacing music.
Yeah,
a lot of the time. I think for a certain mood it works. Maybe the spooky season that we're in, with your so next time you get your pumpkin spice latte, Turn on some
Listen to
Jandek.
That should be coffee house music. Is Jandek?
It is acoustic. So next we're going to talk about an even earlier self-released musician who was so prolific he was playing more than one instrument at once. This is a little bit of She Said by Hasil Adkins. Hasil, I think. Hasil Adkins. From the Norton compilation Out to Hunch.
Let's hear it.
Well, I was going to tell you what happened. I went out last night, and I got hitched up. When I woke up this morning, should have seen what I had in the bed with me. He jumped up out of bed, pulled his hand down his eye, looked at me like a guy in Canada that commodity meat. He said, so this time we're way over yet. We got all alone. Thing was going just right. She jumped out of the car. She put her hand down her eye. She looked at me like a $9 in them out cheek. And she said,
So that's Hasil's story about a bit of a drunken hookup with a demon, a hill person of some sort. I'm not really sure. Hasil Adkins, he focuses a lot on sex, drugs, and rock and roll sort of stuff. Before that was even acceptable to sing about. And he has a lot of paranormal elements. So I don't know if that is supposed to be a demon. He has a song about cutting someone's head off and putting it on his wall, like a deer mount. But this is pretty far out stuff for the 50s and 60s to be recording. Apparently, I don't know if it's apocryphal or not, but I think Hasil heard maybe Jerry Lee Lewis or heard Elvis Presley on the radio and thought, well, that's the name on the label, so he must be playing all the instruments. So Hasil, he learned to play drums and guitar at the same time, and then he would record stuff like She Said, or Chicken is another good one. This is stuff that really influenced bands like the Cramps, which I'm going to play as my recommendation, a cover of this by the Cramps.
Nice.
But what do y'all think of this? I know this is probably more my wheelhouse than yours.
Well, I heard the sort of country bop to it, and that kind of stood out to me as like, oh, this is something Ben sort of gravitates towards, and I really enjoyed it too. It was sort of like that Devil Went Down to Georgia sort of beat. It was actually really enjoyable. I was bopping my head to it when I heard it.
Yeah, I really liked it. Like Michael said, it has a bit of a country to it. I think it has a bit of blues to it. It has a bit of like rockabilly to it. I think honestly, it's weird. I think this is one of the more less weird out of all of them.
Yeah, that's true.
Because it's not far off in terms of production as some of like the really, really early blues, like Robert Johnson type stuff.
The rough stuff, yeah.
Yeah, so like, hearing it on first listen, it's kind of like, oh, this just sounds like something old. But then you listen more into the lyrics, and then that's where you sort of get the element and put it into context with the time that it came out, that you start to understand this is not something that was... It was very original when it came out. Let's just say that.
And also how he played with drums and guitars at the same time.
Right, the one-man band style performance. I think Hasil is probably the first. He's sort of our transition from. We talked about the really big ones. Now we're going to talk about the stuff that
you kind of dig on.
Yeah, that really speaks for me. Yeah. We're gonna go with another crazy, tripped out hillbilly up next. This is the legendary Stardust Cowboy. Apparently, when David Bowie signed to I think Mercury Records. He was given a big stack of 45s as like a welcome gift. Like, hey, we know you like records. We know you really love listening to music and a bunch of different stuff. Here's a ton of people you share a label with now. Surprisingly enough, the legendary Stardust Cowboy was one of them. And he got this record, Paralyzed, and this was apparently his favorite out of the stack.
Hey, yeah! Well,
yourself, never see that bullshit down, Paralyzed. Woo! Paralyzed. Hey, yes, you made me paralyzed. Woo! Wake up to yourself, which makes fun of yourself, Paralyzed.
It's a bit of Paralyzed, one of the wildest records ever made.
Yeah, it's pretty out there.
And this is this is not an exclusive, but would you guys like to hear the lyrics to Paralyzed?
Please.
Of what we just heard. I got a gal way across town. She won't come down to see me unless I pull my shades down. Paralyzed, paralyzed. She puts her arms around me. The way she squeezes me makes me paralyzed. When I go to the show, boy, she does make a fella bestow. Paralyzed, paralyzed. When I look into her eyes, she makes me paralyzed.
I think the only lyric I got out of that while listening was when I go to the show.
I do kind of hear that. But there are lyrics, and you could send in to Mercury Records to get a handwritten copy of lyrics when this single came out. So I do have a little bit on kind of how that was recorded.
Please.
I mean, the legendary Stardust Cowboy, from all accounts, was a weird dude, but he's not like he's just a weird dude. You know, he is not totally conscious of, I think, how weird what he's doing is what he's doing. It's just what he's doing. You know what I'm saying? He's doing what he's doing, and he doesn't think it's that weird. But so apparently they stopped in Fort Worth, Texas, and two vacuum cleaner salesmen, they spied his car, which at the time I think it said on the side, NASA presents the legendary Stardust Cowboy. Mm-hmm. And they talked to him, and they figured out, hey, this guy... he's a performer, so they invited him along to a club they were going to that night. And then they took him to the recording studio, and he recorded that song, I believe in one take, with someone who was just then the engineer there, T-Bone Burnett, who would actually go on to be a relatively famous musician in his own right. But the Ledge, as he's known, plays guitar on that. Well, it's actually a broken dobro where he could only play the first fret. T-Bone Burnett plays the drums, and the bugle solo that happens later on is that's also the Ledge. But they just sort of made one of the wildest records ever. I think everyone at the studio was kind of sleep deprived. It was pretty early in the morning. It was like 2 a.m. or something when that was recorded. But they recorded it. T-Bone ran it upstairs to the radio station up above them, and wouldn't you know it, they had a hit on their hands. So that song, Paralyzed, actually did pretty good business for outsider music. It scraped into the bottom of the Billboard Hot 200. And it was released on Mercury Records, which I don't think that the Ledge did anything else on Mercury, but having a single like that picked up and charting when there are actual real bands making regular music that doesn't chart at all, pretty impressive.
Yeah.
I think there's something very proto-punk about that, the music, especially with the vocals. Obviously, it's very screamy, but also the drums are very reminiscent of hardcore, like.
Right. It's just sort of it's like it's honky tonk, but cranked up like all the way tempo wise, and then not really sung, more screamed and shouted.
Yeah.
You know, but I think Paralyzed is one of the wildest records I've ever heard, honestly. I really that energy is something that is not often matched. Mm-hmm. Especially on acoustic instruments.
Yeah. Let's keep going.
Yeah. So up next, we're going to talk about someone whose record I have right here next to me. This is Bobby Brown, who since has become known as Bobby Frank Brown, to not be confused with the R&B singer of the same name, who contributed a song to the Ghostbusters 2 soundtrack. And that's all the information I have on the other Bobby Brown. But this is from his debut album, The Enlightening Beam of Exanda, parentheses, God's Proof, which kind of foreshadows next week's show. But Bobby Brown apparently had a 6-octave vocal range, and I'm going to play you a bit of My Hawaiian Home from this, which is performed on his homemade instruments. And then we'll talk about it a little more. Maybe I'll give you a pull quote or two from the back of the record.
Forgetting heaven's infinitely blissful vision of oneness, Johnny was born.
Yes, I am an island boy. Up in on a feeling so free and easy. Ooh, you know I do love my Hawaiian home. Ooh, sweet, sweet lady of the ocean gale, singing from the blue. She caught the waves, bring me joy. We know what to do. We go.
I think for me, I really am fascinated with hippie culture. I think one of the most fascinating things for me is what happened to the hippies after the 60s. In Bobby Brown's case, he just kept going. So The Enlightening Beam of Exanda is sort of a concept record. And this is, for the video viewer, original copy, signed.
Wow.
I also have his second album, a live album, played in his van to his dog, signed. I think the vast majority of copies are signed. You could only order them from him. His phone number's back here, as is his address. I assume neither of them are the same anymore. But so Bobby had sort of his way of thinking about the world developed through many means, I'm sure. I can't really tell you the concept, but I can give you a little bit of what he says the story is here on the back. It's, quote, an original contribution to the field of religion and science based on physics, to my knowledge not yet discovered by other humanoids. More revolutionary than Einstein's revelations of Newtonian physics. The application of this physics will perhaps, in fact, lead to the most significant change in the history of humanity, plus total religious unity. So, Bobby Brown had it figured out, and it's in here. I haven't figured it out yet, but it's probably in there somewhere. Some of the people I'm in good company with who were trying to figure it out, quote, it's totally incredible, but it will never sell. That's from Carl Wilson of the Beach Boys. And it's the most incredible thing I've ever heard, Kenny Loggins of Loggins and Messina. So Bobby plays all that, mostly his homemade instruments. He does have a 6-octave vocal range, which is, if true, one of the most impressive vocal ranges ever recorded. Bobby Brown is still around. He might be working on another record. I don't know. I've seen reports of him working on music, but I haven't seen any of the proof. But he just sort of drifts around still to this day. He has another record that is also on streaming, and he has a live album which is not, but all are worth seeking out. I don't know. There's something about this spaced out surfer dude that really...
That is the most beautiful song on the playlist to me. I was really vibing with that one.
I loved it.
Yeah, I don't know. It's definitely outsider because I haven't really heard much else like it. And he seems to have a lot of very big goals, including total religious unity, to get to with his music. But it's really great stuff. It really is. This is like psychedelic to the nth degree. You know, like you can't go too much farther out than this. I'd put it in the same category as something like the Hampton Grease Band, but this is way more unchained than that. I don't know. It's good stuff. I like it a lot.
Yeah. The next thing we got here is another one pulled from Songs in the Key of Z. compilation.
Yes, we will go to that, but before we play that one, which I think will be the last true outsider, I would like to play one that I didn't put on the playlist, but is on YouTube. This was released on Frank Zappa's Bizarre Records. This is the street performer Wildman Fischer with, I believe, Zappa's band. I think Zappa plays guitar on this. So a little more mainstream than a lot of this stuff, but Wildman Fischer, definitely outsider. This is The Circle.
I'm going around your house, baby, just like a circle, yeah. A triangle, a biangle, a triangle, a triangle, baby. I'm moving so fast that not even your cat can follow me, baby. I'm going around. I'm going upside down, inside, up and down and back and round and up and down and up and around and up that down and double into that down like a circle, baby. I say like a circle, baby.
I mean, that's Wildman Fischer from his exceedingly rare An Evening with Wildman Fischer double album. I'd say that's the best song on it, but what'd y'all think of that?
Well, we have a kind of a mainstream artist on here being Frank Zappa. Why would this be considered outsider music?
This is definitely outsider music for the main man there. Like Wesley Willis, for example, recorded albums with a full band. Or Daniel Johnston did too, actually. So I think as long as you have that main person who's leading everything, sort of doing their thing and just being themselves, then you can have supplemental musicians who would be more cognizant of what's up, you know? Yeah?
Yeah.
Let's talk about the last outsider act. This is from... So Songs in the Key of Z is a great book, but it's also a series of 4 compilations, which I highly recommend. I believe they're all streaming.
Yeah.
We're going to play you something from the 4th one. I don't know much about Ed and Alice Gorin. Obviously, they were together at some point or related or something. But this is California Cruiser. And this one, I just like this one. Bit of California Cruiser ushering us into, so we sort of have 2 more things to talk about before we get to recommendations. First I'd like to talk about is something I had a relatively transcendent experience with this summer. So as I've talked about, my summer and my internship kind of sucked, but there were bright spots. One of the brightest spots was I was in Alpena, Michigan, and every year they have the Brown Trout Festival. The Brown Trout Festival was back in full swing this year. And one of the things that they had there was an Elvis impersonator. And scoff all you want. There is something truly magical about the Elvis impersonator. And while not always an outsider artist, Eilert Pilarm definitely is. We're going to play you a bit of a man who is known as one of the worst Elvis impersonators of all time. He's near and dear to my heart. Here's Eilert Pilarm with his version of Heartbreak Hotel. And then we're going to talk about something even weirder, maybe?
Since my baby left me, I found a new place to dwell. Down at the end of the lonely street at Heartbreak Hotel. I get so lonely. I get so lonely, baby. I get so lonely, I could die. All through this Elvis crowd, still can find some room where rose and broken hearted love, where I get so lonely I could die. Bell teeth keep flying.
Sweden's leading Elvis impersonator, Eilert Pilarm. I guess Elvis always comes up around here around Halloween, huh? Mm-hmm. Because we have had an Elvis impersonator on the show before.
And Elvis impersonators are not completely foreign to outsider musicians. There's a few of them, right?
No, I mean, there definitely are a few outsider musician Elvis impersonators. The next one we're going to talk about maybe musically doesn't qualify as outsider music, but conceptually it really does. So obviously Elvis died near the end of the 70s. What a great loss for this country, in my opinion. And there are lots of songs that Elvis never got to lend his signature style to. But there's an album from the band Highway 61 called Elvis Found Alive that hopes to rectify that at least a little bit. Here's an Elvis-esque cover of Every Breath You Take.
What is this episode turning into?
This is turning into Ben finally gets to play everything he wants.
Is Soundcheck the first outsider podcast?
It's starting to feel that way. But if you think about it, if you step back from... obviously, Elvis impersonators are hokey and corny and weird, but there's something really bizarre about the fact that there's a cottage industry grown up around impersonating this guy who's been dead for 40 years. And there are obviously tribute bands and stuff like that, but a total impersonation, an impression of the onstage persona, of the clothes, of the look, of everything.
And we were talking about it. It's just like, there's no market for this. Like, no one wants to hear this, you know?
Yeah, like, this is the only conceivable thing I can think of there being a market for. Honestly, is this exact song, because there's tons of stuff on this album where it's just like re-records of Elvis stuff. There's one original song about Lisa Marie Presley, which I have not listened to yet. There's also the highly recommend, find the Elvis Found Alive album. Last track is the Elvis Is Back rap, which I think it's using rap in more of the old-fashioned sense, like to talk, but that's very strange. But like this to me is the blueprint for what Elvis impersonators should be doing, which is cover modern songs in that Elvis style. And then it's like, he is still alive.
Yeah.
Or is he? Elvis, if you're out there listening, thank you so much for your patronage. The last thing we're going to talk about a second, which I know you have a familial connection to, actually, Brody, is the song poem industry.
What?
Oh, yeah, it isn't as funny.
Brody does not have a song, have a connection to this, but can you tell us a little bit about your personal song poem connection?
Oh, yeah, sure. My great grandma Floria sent one in.
That's it.
Sent one in, and to really, really lighten the mood. It's about her dead husband who died in World War II. And I don't know. I'm biased because she was my family. It's a decent song.
Pretty good tune.
Yeah.
But song poems...
We actually, I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm sorry. I'll let you finish. But we have a 45 of the
song poem?
The song poem that she sent it to. But yeah.
Wow.
It's pretty interesting. I thought you meant like I was related to this next outsider artist.
No. Brody is not related to this next artist nor the subject matter. But so the song poem industry is something that is still kind of around in a different way, but prominently featured again on a SpongeBob episode. You would write out your lyrics and then you'd send it into a company, and they'd record it for you professional. They'd put music to it. If you didn't have music, they'd get it all done. So what this whole industry resulted in, which mostly came from like magazine ads, was a giant swath of songs that are just okay. Just a bunch of songs where it's like, okay lyrics, okay music, it's okay. There are probably some songs that are legitimately really good. Actually, I know there are. I have heard some. But then there's, I don't know if it's people playing jokes on the companies.
Well, this one, I'll get into the backstory, but I actually did some reading up on this one.
Oh, really?
Yes.
But there's lots of pretty strange stuff. And this one I'm about to play you from the American Song Poem Anthology compilation is actually... This is a very bizarre song, I would say. This is called Blind Man's Penis, parentheses, Peace and Love.
I got high last night on LSD. My mind was beautiful and I was free. Warts love my nipples because they are pink. Vomit on me, baby, yeah, yeah, yeah. A blind man's penis is a wreck because he is blind. It's a wreck because he is blind. A blind man's penis is a wreck because he's blind. It's a wreck because he's blind.
So to explain this, I'll read the first paragraph of the background of the genius annotation of it.
Oh, good.
Originally dealing specifically with the topic of Stevie Wonder's penis, the lyrics for this song were scribbled down as a poem by musician and prankster John Truby as a way of alleviating boredom during a shift at his job as a convenience store cashier. Shortly afterwards, he saw an ad in the back of a supermarket tabloid asking for lyricists to send in their song lyrics to co-write songs and split royalties. And, on the Stevie Wonder thing, in the version Truby sent to the song poem people, the line was originally about Stevie Wonder's penis. The artist who recorded this changed it to the more blind man, either out of fear of a lawsuit or because it makes the line flow better.
Wow.
Yeah. I didn't think there was going to be background on this song, but there is.
I really can't believe that there was any information on that. Mm-hmm. But it was a cottage industry for a little while. There is a large amount of these songs, and they're worth digging through. There are entire blogs that are devoted to them, which is where I think I first learned about song poems. But
would you consider all of these outsider music or just a select few?
I mean, generally speaking, song poems aren't outsider music just because a lot of the time it's relatively normal lyrics, relatively normal. Like the studio players are proficient. You know, this is their job. The singers are proficient. But when you get some oddball prankster sending in lyrics like that, that's kind of when the magic happens.
Yeah.
I think in terms of song poems, there aren't really stars, but Rod Keith is someone worth looking up. I think he really loved drugs and alcohol, and he just worked at a song poem place, but he was a super talented musician. So if you can find any of the stuff he produced, if it's stuff he wrote himself or if it's stuff that he produced for other people, really worth checking out. There's like a big Beach Boys-y kind of sound to a lot of it. He's sort of a Brian Wilson-esque composer in a way, but definitely worth hearing, I would say. I think we can just sort of play a little more Daniel Johnston and round this out with recommendations.
I think so.
Sure.
Do you want to talk a little bit about this song, Brody?
I like it.
It's your favorite?
Yep.
This is Brody's favorite Daniel Johnston song, Desperate Man Blues.
much like singing. Can't see one word. And there ain't no comfort.
I think Frank Sinatra should have taken a crack at that one.
that would have been interesting.
You kind of hear it. It's got that music hall sort of kind of croonery thing
kind of like
going on.
Orchestral, vocal, jazz sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we can go into recommendations, which I'm going to break out of the outsider mold going first here. And I'm just going to play a little bit of that She Said cover. So this is a non-outsider band covering an outsider musician, which happens a lot. I know Built to Spill has an entire album of Daniel Johnston
That's
covers.
True.
Yeah. It's just a little bit of She Said from the Cramps live album, Smell of Female.
Hey! What are you looking at? Well, let me tell you what it is. Please. I went out last night and I got completely messed up. And when I woke up this morning, you should have seen what I had in the bed with me. You wouldn't believe it. I will. She looked up at me. I'm getting to that. She looked up at me out of her clear blue and red bloodshot eyeball right in the middle of her twilight zone in the diner. She said, woo!
Highly recommend the Cramps. I could, if you know, they're one of those bands that if I had to pick one band to listen to, that might be it. You know, for the rest of the life.
Yeah. That
might be one. You have a bit of an outsider rec too, don't you, Michael?
I do. Yes, this is my favorite outsider musician, B.J. Snowden. I like her because she's based out of Massachusetts, and she did a single all about a Red Sox catcher named Daisuke Matsuzaka, the longest last name to ever be put on a baseball jersey. I don't care about sports much, but the Red Sox are the only team that I sort of tune into, so this immediately caught my eye. The really interesting thing about Snowden, though, is when Songs in the Key of Z was being put together, when she was asked to be featured on it, she listened to all of the other musicians that were put on this, and she said, wow, all of this sucks. Why are you putting me on this? So it goes to reiterate the ideas that we originally put forward at the beginning of this episode before it totally got derailed. That outsider music is about true originality, and it's more about what the artist thinks of themselves rather than when you project onto them. And I feel like that's going to be a theme moving forward as more outsider music gets made and more stuff like what you're about to hear gets put in here. She's also recognized a lot by Fred Schneider from the B-52s, and he helped her in her recording of The Christmas Hop, which is Snowden's holiday single. She also has one about Halloween, and a lot of songs about Canada. But here is Daisuke Matsuzaka.
Look at him pitch, he is so rich. He's the new super pitcher of the Red Sox. At times he pitches the ball high, look like he can fly. He's Daisuke Matsuzaka. Look at him pitch, he is so rich. He's the new super pitcher of the Red Sox. At times he pitches the ball high, look like he can fly. He's Daisuke Matsuzaka. Daisuke Matsuzaka.
The Dropkick Murphys would be jealous.
Very jealous. You want to talk about someone who was an outsider in personality, at least, Brody?
Yeah, I think he's outsider adjacent. He just kind of makes psych music. It's Bob Trumbull, but he was a bit of an eccentric. he would often hire high school kids, like 14, 15-year-olds, to play on his records.
Yeah, he had two backing bands. I think one of them was the Junkyard Dogs. I don't know what the other one was, but they were both made up of like kids in his neighborhood who were like 14, 15, and he was, I think, in his 20s, later 20s.
So yeah, kind of an out there personality, but I think he makes, again, outsider music. He just kind of makes like what Psych would sound like in the 80s, but it's pretty good stuff.
Really badass album cover. Also.
Yeah, that's true.
So take a smile upon your face that you once had. Although I know you're alright, try to see me now, for that's not bad. Although I know you're retracted from your life and all of your sin. Try to start a new life, then you'll see that it will begin again. Keep me wondering, keep me searching for the times that have gone by. Killed by the hands of an unknown rock star. Yes, you were. Killed by the hands of an unknown rock star. Yes, you were.
So, you know, obviously he has a knowledge of song structure, and it sounds like mainstream psych rock, but he was a out there guy, out there individual. Also, not many 80s psych bands.
Yeah,
so
definitely just doing a weird thing at a weird time musically, even.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically it. This episode started out relatively normal, but much like an outsider song, it got weird pretty quick.
Yes.
And that was on purpose. Ding. Can you put a ding there?
Of course.
Do you want to give a little preview to next week?
Yeah, so we're gonna this is sort of, we tried to do a Halloween month and it didn't totally shake out that way, but next week for the final episode of October, we're gonna be doing something on, it's a little freeform now. We'll see if we have to find some more stuff, but most likely the music of cults and cult leaders and members
and murderers.
And maybe murderers too, we'll see. But is this going to be the one that I'll get in trouble for? Let's find out. That's basically it. So, as always,
good night, Detroit.
All right, Ben, you count in. Yeah, it's in the key, so it's fine. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Trying to remember, but my feelings don't know for sure. Try to reach out, but it's gone. Lucky stars in your eyes. I am walking the cow. I really don't know how I came in here. I really don't know why I'm staying here. Oh. I am walking the cow. Try to point my finger, but the wind keeps blowing me around in circles. In circles. Lucky stars in your eyes. I am walking the cow. I really don't know what I have to fear. I really don't know why I have to care. Oh. walking the cow.